everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Joe Keenan, contributing editor to Fierce Markets, and I'll be moderating this webinar. Our speakers today are Vikas Gulati, Senior Director of Clinical Data Management and Metrics at Vertex, Michelle Harrison, Associate Director of Clinical Data Management and Metrics at Vertex, and Richard Young, Vice President, Vault EDC, Veeva Systems. All right, I think we're ready to begin. Richard, please go ahead.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. And before I go any further, thank you, Vikas. Thank you, Michelle. It's an absolute pleasure to sit here with you today and have a chance to share a little bit of the journey over the last couple of years. So perhaps I could ask you to introduce yourselves to the audience and perhaps help frame it a little bit with the reference to the tough data and the research, and we can take it from there.
Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Harrison. I'm the Associate Director, Data Management.
Good afternoon. I'm Vikas Gulati. I'm the Senior Director of Data Management at Vertex. And Richard, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. And yeah, let's go back a couple of years when the Tufts data came out. When the data came out, it was important because there was nothing like that in the industry out there at that point. So we looked at the data. It went all the way from the startup to the closeout. And we found realistically many things that we were doing real well and many things that we had to improve on. Areas that we were doing well in were data entry, data cleaning, and query process, and data lock, as well as the external data lock. And things that we need to improve upon, we realize that we're not perfect, so we have to look at a database build timelines. They were still much longer than what we wanted them to be.
And if I can, because perhaps a question to you first, and then maybe Michelle as well. Because the thing I found really compelling by it as we went along this journey is it could have been easy for you just to say, we're pretty good. I mean, we're a bit faster here, we're maybe a bit slower there, but overall we're pretty good. But actually you didn't do that. I mean, you clearly said to me, we're industry leading here, and that whatever we do in the future, that cannot slip and slide. That's now our baseline for whatever good looks like in the future. But here's an immediate target, which for us was the startup of the study. But how did you think about approaching making some of those changes or embracing that idea as an organization? Because you run a lot of trials every year. It's not a quick decision to say, we need to make improvements, and how do you approach those?
So we think hard, and we've spent a lot of time in improving our processes for review and lock. And we think that they are, if not the best, at the very top in the industry. There's still improvement we can make, and we are working on making those improvements. So as you can see, most of our sites, primarily we are running CF trials. 90% of trials that we run are cystic fibrosis trials. Sites are entering data within 48 hours. Our sites are amazing. They do get to enter data after the second visit. So that helps with the database lock process. And we'll talk about what we have done to help the sites and make sure that they're always at the forefront of what we are asking them to do. Queries-wise, we do put in the contract that we want them responded as quickly as possible. Sites do end up responding to most queries within 72 hours. Near the locks, we ask them to respond within 24 hours or under 24 hours, and they generally are meeting that.
So can I just pause? I want to, for anyone who hasn't seen the Tufts data, let's just put that into context briefly. And I know you're going to expand in a second, but the average to get data entered was over 8 days, and that was disputed. We saw data from SCRS that pointed us towards 16 days and a high of even 60. We won't go there, but you're 80 to 90% of the time, you absolutely destroy that time. The same with queries, because if we talk about the database lock and time to decisions, the average was almost 40 days. So again, you're hitting our lock in less than half the time of the industry average. So you seem to be really on the leading edge of a lot of characteristics here, which is incredible.
I think, yeah, we're very proud of the work that the team has done here. And what you'll see is, how do we do this? And what makes Vertex different than other sponsors or other companies, and why are we able to do this? One of the big pieces at Vertex has been, and is going to be, is we always think of sites first, patients first. That is the ultimate goal for us, to making sure that our sites and patients are taken care of, and everything else will follow. We believe in carrot, not the stick, meaning that we are looking for simplicity. We're not looking for penalty clauses in the contract for the sites. We are hoping from what we have given them consistently, we try to be consistent in how we create databases. We are consistent in application of standards and type of queries we are writing and type of reviews we are doing. The sites are expecting over and over again what to expect from Vertex data managers. On top of that, we spend a lot of time understanding and learning what motivates the sites and what them to. So we have them part of a journey where it is important and we are constantly asking them for feedback. There's a constant communication with them. There are many things at Vertex we do to make sure sites are at the forefront. From meeting with the coordinators, key coordinators every 6 months to understand how things are going at the sites from various studies that we are running. We have finite number of sites that we go to, so it's important for us to understand what the sites and their feedback and what the sites are telling us and improve upon those things. We do have study level engagements that we do. We have data management specific tables that we have at the investigator meetings where while the meeting is going on, we have a data manager available for the sites, the CRAs, PIs, to actually go and ask questions and see the live demo of the database and how actually things work. If they have questions, they can touch and feel and play with that. We are seeking input from the sites, seeking input from coordinators at all times on how to improve the essentially completion guidelines and how we can improve the CRX. Internally, we do a lessons learned after every study. What worked well, what were the wins that we had, and what are the things that we can work on as we go forward. And we do apply those in the subsequent studies. There's also weekly newsletters that go out from the clinical team. So it's a joint effort, just not DM only task. That's where we see a lot of effort being spent in a dedicated area in the weekly newsletter for the sites for DM activities. So it could be used for reminders, trainings, query trends, and other aspects of the sites can see what is happening. Michelle, you want to talk a little bit about lessons learned that we do?
We do. We do conduct lessons learned on every study, just getting feedback, as you said, from sites, from team members, from monitors, and then we take that and try to apply that to our next study.
And so something I know you're gonna go on to now is an interesting transition. So all of the work you're doing is building up to that milestone, that data management moment of fame, locking the database. But I notice you're going to strike through part of the phrase database. So perhaps I could ask you to expand on that a little bit as well.
This is a big education we had to do at Vertex and in general in the industry, that when we lock data, it's locking the data, not the database. You are locking your external data because that's where your primary and secondary endpoints end up being mostly. So there's no point calling and lock of a clinical database if your external data is not being reconciled clean and ready to be locked. So we actually call it as a milestone as a data lock, and I would like the industry to move towards that and change that milestone from database lock to data lock.
Maybe a quick comment then. So data lock, how does Vertex feel about unlock? Is that a dirty phrase or is that something you see a lot? Or where does your approach feed into that as well?
So full efforts we make, even though we are locking in 15 days, 18 days, most of the studies are in 15 days now. Unlocks are still, it's not a dirty word, but we don't want unlocks. We are locking data in 15 days with quality, and our goal is to never have an unlock and still be able to lock in 15 days. And we train our vendors that way, we work with the sites that way, we work with the CRAs that way. We are planning to lock, and we plan to lock with quality at the first time.
I think that's an important thing, because this again separates you from many other companies I spoke to in the Tufts research. It felt like database lock or data lock became an interim milestone to a bigger target. And it felt like, well, if we unlock, it's not the end of the world. Whereas you're saying, no, we're locking with the intention that we're done. So your data management processes are very, very thorough and all geared to that day is our day to celebrate and we should be finished.
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the things we also have done is, this is what we call, this is what I call is our onion slide. As you peel the layers, you can see what reviews are being done at a single data point. There are multi-layer of reviews that any data management company or any sponsor will do on one data point. And that's what we have to always keep in mind when we are looking at triple checking or quadruple checking at the DM time. I mean, how many times should DM personnel should be checking something? Or is one time enough, because you do have 10 different layer of checks being done on that single data point, and this will be caught eventually somewhere by somebody. So you have to keep things in mind. If there are primary endpoints, yes, you may want to have a double check somewhere else, but generally you will see from CCGs to edit checks, to CRA reviewing it, to CDM reviewing it, to the study teams reviewing it, cross-functional teams reviewing it, the same data is reviewed multiple times. You start early and you be cognizant that there are multiple layers of review. It is ultimately becomes a risk-based approach of how you review data. You spend more time in reviewing your critical data, and you make sure that your study team and your project teams are capturing everything else that they're supposed to be capturing.
But I think what you're describing here, Vikas, very well, is not all data is born equally. But also, you've created an emphasis as an organisation on the stuff outside of EDC, which I think is kind of started the Tufts research. You know, as data managers, we talk about EDC as our primary tool, but actually 70–80% of your primary data is outside of EDC. So does your onion diagram, as you call it, kind of take that into account, and you think about who's reviewing data and when, and what's the most effective way?
Absolutely, and I think 70–80% is a good marker of what is external data coming in, what is a primary or secondary endpoint. And as we are doing more and more studies with new biomarkers and novel biomarkers, we're seeing more and more external data coming in and finding different ways of looking at that data. So it's one thing to have data being collected in CRFs and running edit checks on them. But what is more important is that you're doing lab checks, you're doing your conformance checks, you're doing external data checks, you're doing some oversight checks to make sure what you expected from your transfers, you're getting those items. That becomes even more important than actually your content within the data management, because you will be able to catch tomography checks, you'll be able to catch some certain other checks, but some of the lab checks, you have to really spend some time understanding what the lab is and how you're capturing that and how you're then checking for those. So that's one advice, adding on to more, right? So as I said earlier, to improve speed, you have to begin reviewing ASAP. You have to start reviewing from the first patient screen. You don't wait until every 3 months or every 6 months or every 9 months, or wait until certain milestones to start reviewing data. You must have to ensure that your team, not just you, your teams have access to live data, whether it be your clinical study management team or whether it would be your medical monitoring team, so they can conduct their reviews in a timely manner. Medical monitors need to be able to medical monitor the patients in real time. So we need to make sure that their views are available as soon as the first patient are screened. Figure out how quickly we can get the data from the labs. One of the things that we have spent a lot of time last year is trying to develop an automated downloading from our primarily labs, where we can get the data within 24 hours of lab being collected at the lab or the reports being generated by the lab. So there was a lot of effort spent on having access to data very easily and very quickly. And when you're looking at specialty labs, find labs, especially on a critical study. See if you can find labs or find in the regions where you're conducting study, so you can avoid shipping time. What we have found is we hit 15 days. We could even go faster, but some of the time is spent just for shipping the samples from the site to the labs. So if you can find strategically labs who can do the work for you within the same region, you will be able to cut down some of the log timeline.
So you've really explored the entire critical path, the lineage of that data from patient to reporting. Something I failed to clarify earlier, I just want to come back on. So the 15 days, this came out in the Tufts research a lot. When do you start the clock on those 15 days? And obviously define it as data lock, but when do you start?
So what's the goalpost? So our starting is last subject, last visit.
So not last data generated, but
last subject, last visit. So what we expect at that point is the sites will enter the data within 24 hours of the last subject, last visit. And then we have a clockwork. From that point on, we expect the samples to go out to the labs within 24 hours. Labs test and send us the transfer within 3 days. Us to reconcile within 2 days and get back and forth. So 15 days is what we expect that PIs will be signing off at the end of the 50 days and calling it a lock.
I mean, this is, again, interesting because you're talking about a huge coordinated effort, but you don't do 1 or 2 studies a year.
Correct.
I mean, this is coordinated across multiple teams, a lot of studies.
Correct.
So you've really focused on your processes.
Correct. And I think it goes back to the team that I have here, them making sure that it's just not data management. I think we have to always remember is the entire organization has to buy into this. You have to have your clinical team buy into this. You have to have a medical team buy into this. And you have to have your vendor oversight team buy into this because they will be the one who will be pressuring the vendors and setting up contracts with the vendors, making sure that this is done accurately and on time.
Perfect.
Some more advice. I can't say enough on focusing on external data sources. You have to start looking at that early. You have to understand what's restricted, what's non-restricted, when can the restricted be looked at, and can a blinded statistician look at the restricted data so you don't have the findings 2 days before the lock. So have all those things tied up and have all those things discussed within the study teams and your teams so you're not getting surprised at the last minute. Other thing we have asked for vendors is that we have asked vendors to provide us a confirmation that they have locked their databases. So that way we don't get a surprise transfer from vendor after we have declared lock and something changed on their end. We have asked clinical teams to confirm that all the samples have been sent to the labs. So some of those pieces have to be agreed upon and beyond Vertex, and you have to start early, right? So from vendor contracts or when labs are working on their worksheets, that's where you have to develop all these relationships with vendors. We talked a little bit about consolidating vendors when possible. We have incidents where we have multiple external labs. If we can subcontract with a lab, with another lab, so we get only one transfer rather than getting multiple transfers, we will do that. So we are dealing with one vendor rather than 2. That's something to think about. If there is a biomarker, the specialty lab, we will have the biomarker lab go through the central lab. So that will enable us to move things quickly because central labs are a little bit more equipped to move faster than the specialty biomarker labs. And finally, you learn from every study, you revise and improve in every study, every subsequent study, you train as much you need to train the staff, and always reuse when you can. I think that's the key part. We have standard specs for data transfers. We have standards for data collection. And as much as possible, we want to reuse. We want to get to a point where we can have a study reusing, I would say, 50 to 75% of data that we collect on a regular study. We are not there yet, but that's our ultimate goal we want to get to.
So I know I'm just looking at time. I'd like to keep 5 minutes for you for some closing thoughts. But there's one thing I'd like to say to you, which is I'd like to recognize your contribution to us as well. Because I feel like you've, as a company, have challenged us, but you seem to be prepared to take on internal challenges that perhaps a company of your size and stature elsewhere might be more reluctant to do. Is that part of the culture here, and is that what you see as success for the future?
That is definitely part of the culture here. I think we are in a unique situation where we're a large company, but at the same time, we are allowed to take risks as long as we're innovating. We continue to innovate every day inside Vertex as well, not just partnerships, just trying to figure out how we can do things better, faster, but keeping the same quality or improving the quality. Innovation is key, and I think that was one of the reasons why we partnered with Veeva. As we looked at the platform, we looked at the software, it seemed like the perfect fit for Vertex to go on the longer journey as we go forward.